Do what you want, cause a pirate is free. You are a pirate. My eye bags have eye bags of how tired we are. Hi, hello, how's it going? It's Lo. Listen, I'm in the middle of my paid time off. I have 30 days of paid time off as per Brazilian legislation. Yes. And I took like 15 days to rest a little because I'm exhausted. And I took a 10-day trip, so I'm still exhausted. And I decided that I was gonna take a break, a little break from BookTube. Just like I read a lot of stuff and I'm gonna talk about them, but I just didn't really want to think. But no, as I was taking my well-deserved leave, nonsense happened and I have to discuss it. So today we're going to talk about book piracy. Again. A couple of days ago, author Shay Miranda, and I'm gonna name drop because if they're stupid enough to do this on Maine, then they're stupid enough to get the consequences on Maine also. They decided to do a spreadsheet on people who allegedly did book piracy. Some people do not have friends or an attorney. The main argument of the author against book piracy is the very same argument that people will always say. It's that book piracy is wrong, it's illegal, it hurts authors because it hurts sales, lowers the amounts that authors can make, which is already not a lot, and that people are bad people for pirating books because they do not see the side of the author and they're actively harming the author. And so the spreadsheet is to somehow punish them even further for not having money to have books. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure what's the point of the spreadsheet, other than it was a terrible idea. Just to out people like that. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. But again, like I said, this person has no friends. And they also have no legal counsel. So they did a spreadsheet to warn other authors about people who regularly engage in book piracy according to their standards. I assume that they keep receipts of this. But to assume that, it would be to assume that this person knows what the size of the mess that they're making is, and I'm pretty sure that they don't. So yeah, they did the spreadsheet in order to warn other authors of people who are not worthy of receiving ARCs and whatnot. And this caused a whole ruckus on Twitter because that's a stupid ass idea. As an attorney, here's free legal counsel. Under no circumstances you should do a spreadsheet accusing people you don't know of a crime. That's a lawsuit, and I really hope that she gets fucked over it because it was fucking ridiculous. Anyway, I was not going to address this at any given point because I am exhausted of this conversation missing the central point that authors and workers in publishing being paid peanuts while publishing moguls are making millions of profits is not an issue of book pirating as much as it is an issue of capitalism. And what publishing really wants you to believe, and so does the entire industry, is that yes, you're making peanuts and you're making almost little to nothing for work that you worked really hard on not because there are people who are profiting off of your work, but because a random teenager in the global south is using Z Library, God rest its soul, and they are the ones who are ruining your career, not the publishing execs paying starvation wages to your employees and also lowballing as much as your work is worth. No, the teen in the global south who would not have read your work otherwise is the one to blame for this. Precisely. You were very smart to come to this conclusion. Anyway, I was exhausted of this conversation, and I'm still exhausted of this conversation, as you can see by my general demeanor, but I was gonna leave it be until I read this tweet by Shay. Let's read together, shall we? I don't care how poor and what third world country you live in. If you can pirate books, you can find countless free reading resources online that don't hurt the authors you supposedly love. Not only this person does not have an inch of sympathy, they are also very dumb. This once again proves to me that Americans not only believe that the world exists to personally service them, they also don't get much in way of geography schooling. So let me tell you something, Shay. I know that you don't like the idea of free anything, free knowledge, whatever, but let me give you this little tidbit of information, a little tidbit of tuition for free, let's say. We don't use this term third world anymore. This came from a socio-political division of the world during the Cold War between first, second, and third world. First world countries being NATO, second world countries being communist allied countries, and third world countries, countries that did not ally with any of those. With time, first world came to signify countries that were rich, because only rich countries could ally to NATO, and third world came to define countries that are poor. But this does not tell us at any given point what happened to those countries to be poor, what are the common history in those countries, what are the things that make this country be poor. Is it the social indexes? Is it the fact that they do not produce much? What is it about these countries that makes them poor? And so nowadays we can use either developing or development countries. This is based on the Human Development Index. But the countries that used to be the third world prefer to be called the global south, because it denotes the constant relationship of colonialism and the shared history of struggle between those people and between the countries in the global south. So the north, the global north, would be what we would call the first world countries, and the south would be what we would call the third world countries. So nowadays we don't use third world anymore, and I wouldn't expect someone who is I would expect someone with the Puerto Rican flag on their bio to be aware of the struggles of colonialism and difficulty of access to education and books and literacy in countries in the global south. But apparently when you move to the United States, that sense of solidarity is gone, and that flag in your bio just becomes a way for you to get diversity points, isn't it? Allegedly. But anyway, the thing is, I'm not here to discuss the morality or the legality of book piracy, mostly because this is not an issue of legality. Book pirating is illegal. Yes, it is illegal. This is not a surprise to anyone. The question that we could discuss is if this is something that is moral, because morality and legality are not always the same. And I say this as an attorney. It's not. It's very difficult for you to go around and say that every single thing that is legal is moral and every single thing that is moral is legal. This is often not the case, and it has not been the case since times immemorial. There is this very famous tragedy called Antigone, something like that. I'm not sure how to say that in English, but it's a Greek tragedy. About a woman who defies the orders of the state to bury her brother. It's very interesting, but it highlights how morality and legality are more often than not at odds with each other, and have been ever since there has been a state. Again, this is a question of morality, and I'm not going to sit here and discuss the morality of book piracy. It's a very long, very drawn out discussion. What I want to discuss here is something that I realized with this spreadsheet in this specific instance with this author, which is a lot of people think that book piracy is a personal shortcoming. Like, people are bad people, and for this reason that they will pirate books. And more often than not, almost like crime. Imagine like if you see someone shoplifting school supplies, that doesn't make that person a bad person. That makes a person who was subjected to certain things in society that make them unable to reach basic necessities, unable to meet basic necessities, much like homelessness is not a crime. And so I think that there is this punishing attitude, especially in readers of the global north, and especially in American readers, that people do these things that are illegal because they are bad people, when it's not the case. Book piracy, like homelessness, like drug use, it's a systemic issue. And I think that when we're discussing book piracy, we're missing the fact that this is a systemic issue. And no matter what you think about it, and no matter if you think it's justifiable or not, if you want book piracy to end, you have to address the systemic ways in which book piracy becomes a viable alternative. This was entirely the reasoning behind Netflix and other streaming services. People wanted the ease of accessing a varied catalog of things that they could watch. And for a while, that easy way was torrenting stuff. But then it became Netflix because the things were available on Netflix, and it was easier for you to just pay for the subscription and access the entire catalog of movies and series that it was for you to go and risk your computer and get a fuck ton of viruses in your computer by torrenting stuff. And now it came to a point where it's just becoming easier to torrent stuff again. And so it's all about access and all about the systemic ways in which books become unavailable. And I think that this is what I wanted us to discuss today. What can we do so that books don't become unavailable and so that book piracy becomes less of an issue? And I think that this is where the author went wrong, because they started treating book piracy as a personal shortcoming, as people just being bad people, when in fact it's about what makes those books accessible, what makes those books inaccessible, and how can we circumvent issues that makes books inaccessible. Because book inaccessibility is actually harmful for everyone. It's harmful for every single person when a book is unavailable, when the access to that book is thwarted. And I think that more than just a book being unavailable, it's when you cut off access to certain material that causes the issues with book piracy. Because book piracy is basically what's going to allow, for instance, children in certain states of the United States to have access to LGBTQ plus books, or books that talk about race, because those books are not going to be available in bookshops, they're not going to be available in the library, they're not going to be available in ways that are easy for those children to access, and so they're going to resort to book piracy because of the situation and the political situation that they're living in. This is the same case when you have people who live in countries where certain themes are considered taboo and they're not discussed and they're prohibited. Countries with previous censorship. I didn't want to say this, right? But it's very funny for me to see people who often do 50 plus book hauls on BookTube being like, I'm so against book piracy. Oh, it's easy for you to say. You can buy 50 fucking books at once. You know how much my copy of Babel cost me? It cost me 150 reais. That's more expensive than my phone bill. There was no one who sold Babel in Brazil. I had to import it. It took me over a month and a half for it to get here. And so I can only get a hardcover book from abroad like every 3 to 4 months or so because I'm an attorney. I make good money. And so I can afford that. That's within my budget. The majority of people in Brazil cannot afford this. 30 million people are food insecure in Brazil as we speak. We have 200 million people. That's almost like a quarter of the Brazilian population is food insecure. They don't have money for these types of books. And even books, like I have many books that I've shown you guys time and again that are beautiful editions, beautiful Brazilian editions, translated editions of foreign books. Even then, those books are extremely expensive as well. They cost up to 70, 80 reais. And that is a lot of money for people who are food insecure. And so books being inaccessible are a problem, because the books that become accessible when you have such a narrow possibility of accessing those books in the first place are books by white authors, are books by white women writing romance, books by white men writing fantasy. And the diversity that this community really wants, the diversity that this community says that it looks forward to, that diversity is lost because those people cannot have access to books that with people who look like them. And so people in the global south are being forced to read books by the same authors. Like, for instance, I went to the city of Paraty in Rio de Janeiro, and I found this cursed Colleen Hoover stand. Each book cost like 60 reais, which is not cheap. And it was all Colleen Hoover. If I wanted to read all Colleen Hoover books, I would have been able to, but I would rather die. And so I did not. And so what I mean to say is that when books become unavailable, it hinders diversity. It's impossible for you to have diverse books when you have just a small little stream of books coming from the place where books are most published, which is the United States and the UK, which has the largest publishing industries, the stories that are being told in those places are not being spread to other places. Even if those stories talk about origins, myths, people, culture that comes from the global south, and that becomes even more of an issue, because then those people who have those stories written about them, they are they themselves cannot read their story, and they themselves cannot tell if they're being represented respectfully, or if there's being fetishized, or if they're being treated badly by the author. Very famous case of this that I've talked about this before in this channel, Woven in Moonlight. Woven in Moonlight was not published in Bolivia, and I dare to say I know exactly why it wasn't published in Bolivia. It was because it treated Evo Morales as a rapist who smells bad. So, you know, not exactly the thing the Bolivians are willing to hear Americans say about them. What I was saying is that books being unavailable are a problem, not just because of book piracy, but because of many other factors, because it hinders diversity, because it makes people not have access to books of people who look like them. And because books by itself, and this is my position on it, I think books are a human right. I think everyone has the right to read as many books as they want. And I think that everyone has the right to have easy and facilitated access to books, because I think books are inherently revolutionary. I think books are, there is a reason why we burn books, why people burn books. When you want to smother some type of revolution, you want to smother some type of people, because books are able to gather knowledge but also share stories that make each one of us look more human. And this is why fascists like burning books so much. This is why they like banning books so much. They don't want certain stories to be told because they don't want certain people to be seen as people. And the more that we make complicated for those books to circulate, the more that we're playing into this very game of fascism, of making sure that certain stories are never told. And if book piracy happens to be one of the things that people do to circumvent that, I am not morally opposed to it. But even if you are morally opposed, if you think that people should not use book piracy to circumvent certain restrictions that they have of books, you have to admit that these people need the access to the books in the first place. So instead of doing a spreadsheet and telling those people that they're bad, what can we do to make sure that we can improve access to people, not only impoverished people in the global north, but also people in the global south who have many restrictions of access to books? I have a couple of ideas. First things first is accountability with publishers. Publishers need to be held accountable and pay livable wages to their workers, and also pay livable wages to their authors. This is non-negotiable, and I strongly suggest everyone to look into the work that has been done by HarperCollins Union. They reached a tentative agreement with their HarperCollins, and so it highlights just how important it is to have permanent negotiations. I strongly suggest authors to do the same. It's important that people are adequately paid for their services, and that includes both workers in publishing and authors. And publishing can't afford this, because publishing has a ton of money. They make record profits. And so it's totally doable to make sure that publishing is paying authors and workers fairly. So this is something that we need to push forward. Another thing that we need to push forward, affordable prices in books. This is something that price gauging is very real, and I have an unpopular opinion about this. I think that those exclusive editions and those exclusive things that, drive up the price up to the wall, those things are kind of detrimental. Not saying that they shouldn't exist, but like cheap versions of books should be available. And I'm not even talking about ebooks. Not everyone can afford a Kindle. A Kindle is kind of expensive in other places other than the United States. I'm just saying that books in general should be more affordable. And when we're willing to pay outrageous amount of money for specific books, that kind of drives up the price of books in general. So I would be very careful in which special editions I would engage. And that brings us to a very broader conversation on consumerism on BookTube. and on the book community as usual. Because listen, you really will not. There is no fucking reason for you to do a 50 book haul. I am very adamantly against that. There is no reason for you to do that. There is no reason for you to flaunt and for you to, I am adamantly against book hauls. But anyway, that's another conversation for another video. Another thing that is important for us to do is support Global South creators, because when you support Global South creators from the Global North, you allow them to have more financial resources because of conversion rates to be able to afford more books. I have a playlist of Global South creators you can check in my channel. Make sure that you're watching them, giving them your watch time, supporting them in their Patreon in every way that they can, because then they will be able to afford those books as well, and they will be able to participate in the community as equals, and not as people who get, who have to sort of worked 3 times as hard to be able to produce the same content that is being produced by the Global North. Another thing that is also important is for companies to offer sponsorships and deals for outside of the United States and the UK. That doesn't work for every single company, but companies do have certain things that work in other places, like Audible, like Kindle Unlimited. Those can very much and pretty much be offered to everyone where those services are available, and they are not. And they are not offered because of land regions and because of regional restrictions. And so pushing for those to be offered as also to people in other countries is a huge necessity, to also make sure that those people can be able to afford those books and or have more easy access to those books. Also, speaking in the Global South, allowing Global South authors to break into the industry is a huge part and a huge necessity on making books more accessible to people from the Global South, because those people know exactly the hurdles and difficulties that people in the Global South face, and they're able, for instance, to do giveaways. They're able to have more participation in the local scene, and for them to break into the industry is harder as Global South authors. Once again, giving the example of call for Latinx writers and only those who are based on the US when Latin America itself is excluded. I will never let that die, I will tell you. So that is fucked, but it's not more fucked, I will say, than the fact that NetGalley is region locked. So here in Brazil, I can't request certain books because I am in Brazil. And so it's all the books that are all the hype, all the rage. Because I am in Brazil, I can't request them. And this happens the same with many other countries. And so this author, Shay Miranda, was like, oh, you can just go to NetGalley. NetGalley won't let me because I'm Brazilian. And there is no reason why, because they're sending ebooks. It's so fucking stupid. I have to log into accounts of other people to read and to be able to talk about books, about authors that I like, and to produce the content that I produce. It's just it's so ridiculous. What NetGalley does is segregation, and I will die on this hill. Mostly, we can also push our representatives to do international taxation deals on books and make sure that books are not taxed when they're imported into other areas. This is very interesting to be done. I've been talking about this for a very long time now. And when we're pushing about international taxation deals or bilateral deals, we're making sure that those costs are driven down and that people have more access to books in their original language easier. And the access is facilitated for those people. This also goes hand in hand when we go to condemning techniques, war techniques, that will target libraries, or when we're condemning public policies that will make certain books about certain topics unavailable. We have to be able to condemn those to make sure that more people around the world are able to get certain material that they are not able to do right now because of political and war restrictions. Anyway, I have been saying all of this for a very long time, and this has not been my angriest video, because here's the thing. If you think that book piracy is wrong, but you want people to have access to books, there is a lot that you can do. The thing that you cannot do is, once again, a spreadsheet calling people out on things that you have no evidence for. And I feel like that highlights the idea that many people in the book community have about book piracy, that is a personal shortcoming and failure, and not necessarily a way in which the book community is failing people. Because each time that a person doesn't have easy access on a library, on a website like NetGalley, every time that a person doesn't have easy access to a book in a situation like this, we're failing as a community. Because as a community of readers, more and more people have to join us. It's the nature of reading. And if you're against doing those things that make people have easier access to books, then you fall into that very weird trap that I've said before time and time and again, because you don't see books as ways to revolutionize and ways to unite people and ways to broaden your horizons. You see books as a quirky thing, and a quirky thing that makes you different from other girls. And just, you just want to cozy up with your books because that's your whole fucking personality, and you don't realize that books and education are central parts of the development of the world as a whole and of the liberation of the world as a whole. I am very passionate about liberation, and I think liberation can only come with education. And that can only happen if people have easier access to books. So if you don't like book piracy, that's fine. Join me in doing this, where we try to take measures so that people will have easier access to books. Are you donating your books? Are you unhauling your books and donating them to your library? Have you ever done a book haul that you donate those books exclusively to a library? You don't hoard them? Are you talking to your representatives about book taxation deals, international and local? Are you talking about your representatives about funding and publicly funding libraries so that more people have access to books and librarians don't have to scrape the bottom of the barrel to offer something to the people who go there to try to find something to read? Are you doing this? Because before you try to shame people individually for being a person who happened to pirate a book, which, by the way, there are studies that show that the majority of people who pirate books also buy books in larger quantities than the rest of the population. And so the idea that these people are not contributing to the book community is wrong for many reasons. But if you happen to think that even then, even knowing that this is not the case, that people are not impacting negatively as much as you might think, if you still think that this is wrong, then I hope that you're joining other people in doing things that will actively make sure that more people have access to books, and so they don't have to resort to book piracy. Because that's the only moral position that I can see for a person who is against book piracy to have, that doesn't involve them thinking they're better than everyone else just because they have access to books. Because if you think that you're better than everyone else just because you have access to books, and you feel the need to do a tweet saying, I don't give a shit what third world country you come from, I hope... I'm not going to say anything because, unlike certain people, I have friends and I am an attorney, and so I know exactly what I can or cannot say, but know that it was thought. This was a short video, just mostly talking and discussing this topic. I am very, very bone tired of repeating the same fucking thing every fucking time whenever the discussion on book piracy comes up every 3 months or so, because it's always the same thing. It's always people saying that book piracy is an individual flaw, an individual shortcoming, and not understanding that book piracy is a symptom of a larger problem, which is book unavailability. And book unavailability is a problem that impacts every single one of us. And book piracy is merely a symptom of that. And so, like the best medical treatments, you have to find the root of the problem and not just attack the symptom, because then the root of the problem is not going to go away. And I'm so very tired of having to say that over and over again, because people are so fucking selfish. And so they lack so much empathy for people, and they don't think twice before saying, I think books are luxury items, and if you can't afford them, then you shouldn't be able to read them. So is education. So is going to school, learning something. Are you out of your fucking mind? Anyways, so these are a couple of alternatives that you have if you're very passionate about people having access to books, which I commend you for. But don't go after people who don't have access to books and are doing what they can in order to have a respite for their reality and to learn something new. Because that's not it. That's just being a shitty human being. And that's how you have to go private on Twitter because everyone is calling you fucking out on it. It was ridiculous. If you're watching this, Shay, know that it was ridiculous. It was fucking ridiculous. And still, after that, they still were like, oh, the neurodivergent sense of justice. The neurodivergent what? The neurodivergent what? Are you out of your fucking mind? You just said that you don't give a shit for poor people. And you're like, the neurodivergent sense of justice. Excuse-moi? What? Anyway, the white Latinos are wild. That's what I'm gonna say. It was a mistake when they learned words because they were like, you're gaslighting authors into thinking that you care. That is.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Anyway, this whole shit show was very ridiculous. I am aware, and I just wanted to say something because the next time that someone talks to me about this shit, I'm just gonna reply this video and ask, are you contributing to your community to make sure that books are available and that people have access to them? Because if not, then I'm just thinking that you want to gatekeep books, and that you're not very bright for thinking that this is a personal issue, not a systemic one. Anyway, so this was today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.